Hey tubers, welcome back for another adventure. So if one picks up one of these China junkers and you bring it on home, many times you'll find that there's more than one thing wrong with it. Like, let's say you get it home and you walk up to it, you put a charge on the battery, turn the switch on, and you kind of get a dashboard light. In my case, I get a 0. I think that thing describes it pretty well. And you hit the button and you got no starter. What we're going to do in this video is take a few minutes to do the troubleshooting. I do have to do just a little bit of theory to make that happen. You actually have 3 different circuits going on here when you want to start this thing, when you turn the key on. Circuit number 1 is to basically turn the quad off. This is the switch, this is the connector that goes to the key switch, and you see that black and white wire and you see the green wire. When the key switch is off, those two are shorted together. Okay, and the red and solid black wire are not connected. When you turn the quad on, the all-terrain vehicle on, that green and black and white wire are no longer shorted together, which basically turns on your ignition circuit or enabled your ignition circuit. And when you turn it on, you take the red wire and black wire and connect them together, which I'm doing with that little jumper because obviously I can't troubleshoot this thing with the fender. So when I did that, right, my red light came on. What is that telling me? That tells me that power is going from the battery, right, and it goes to one side of the starting relay. See that littler wire? It comes off of that, goes into this block, which goes through the fuse, comes up here, goes through the switch, and is now sending some power throughout the bike. But once again, I'm hitting this button and I have no starter. So the troubleshooting begins. If you don't know anything about the bike, this is how I recommend troubleshooting a starter problem. First thing you want to do is take this little plate off and make sure that your crank is free, that you're not locked up, right? If your engine's seized, you got more than a starter problem. You got to figure out, why is my engine seized? But let's assume your engine is not seized and your starter could turn around. When you expose this, and assuming you have a good battery, if you short across here, your starter will engage. And you could do that with many things. I recommend doing it with something pretty solid because it is going to spark, and if it's thin, it's going to get hot. But if you short these two together, right, your starter goes around. If you do that and you don't get any spark and your starter doesn't go around, you got to start looking at, well, this wire goes from the starter to right here, right? So I know that's hooked up. Do I have ground, right? Is my battery hooked to ground? Because there's really only 2 wires that go to the starter. But let's assume that you do this and it goes around. The next thing you want to do is notice right here. You have 2 wires going into the starting relay. They go to the coil that when you put power on one and ground on the other, engage the coil. And you'll notice that they go right through this switch or right through this connector here. Once again, green is ground, yellow is where the power comes in. So you can disconnect this, once again, done much better with two hands, better than one, right? And you see this wire goes right to here. And now you can actually start putting power to this to see if your starting relay works. You also have to hook up ground. Without ground, this isn't going to work. So let's just take a moment to do that, and we'll see what happens. So once again, we have the wire coming out of the starting relay, and the yellow one with the green stripe on it, we have going to ground. The other one, the yellow wire with the red stripe on it, I just jammed that in there, and if I touch it to the side that eventually goes to the battery, whoa, nice. So that's a good thing. The other thing you could do is if you touch it to, right, this side goes into one side of the fuse, comes out, and goes to the other side of the fuse. If you touch it there, you can see the fuse is good. You also know the fuse is good, once again, because the light's on. So it appears as if my starting relay is good. Now you have to start asking, what is not working on this bike? Why is my starting relay not engaging? Through the wire harness, am I sending power to it? And am I sending ground to it? If the answer is I'm not sending power or ground to it, that's where my trouble lies. So let's do a little more troubleshooting. It's time to use the old handy meter, and let's set it up and see what we have, what we're sending that and what we're not sending that. So if I put my meter on the ohm value, right, and the black wire goes to ground, and I test my red wire, and once again I'm on the ohm value. When I push the starter, I'm basically grounding what should be the hot wire, right? So ground is coming in on the hot wire. So let me flip the leads around and let's see what's coming in on the green wire. So on the green wire, I've hooked my meter. Once again, the black still to ground. I've gone to the 20 volt scale and I got nothing there. But as I was looking at wires, I'm like looking at the wires that go to a micro switch that go to my brake handle. So what I did is, once again on the voltage scale, just want to make sure you guys could read that. When I squeeze the brake handle, I get my 12 volts or almost 12 volts because my battery pack is dying. And I'm like, wow, they've completely swapped these wires around. So now that I know the reason why my starter wasn't engaging is because I wasn't squeezing my brake handle, right? Now I know, okay, we kind of have this figured out. So now I can figure out how to get my bike started. And what I'm going to do is hook up everything properly and go forward from there. So I hooked the wires up again, right? I just slid the plug in. And now that I know I have to squeeze the brake and hit the starter, I got the starter spinning. At the same time that I have that going on, I decided to take a moment to see if it's sparking. Let me see if I can't show you that. I think the interference is from the spark. Anyway, So I have spark, and I got my starter going around, and all is good. And I guess the concepts I want to teach you is, first of all, on these China quads, a green wire might be ground, might be hot. A black wire might be ground, or it might be hot. You know, by hot I mean 12 volts. So make no assumptions. Let's also say this was hacked up. For some reason, this lever was missing and the wires were just swinging in space. You know, obviously it's not going to work, right? I'm not going to send 12 volts and ground off to my starting solenoid. So I guess the concept you always have to walk around with in your mind, to engage the solenoid, I need 12 volts and I need ground. How am I going to do that? Obviously I could do a bypass. I could just hook one of these wires straight to ground and put 12 volts on the other one. It looks like the coil's floating here. Neither side is hooked to ground or hot. So I can do that as a bypass. But what do they got going on up in here? It's kind of an unknown. So if you do that kind of thing, you could put your own little on and off switch. And then you could worry about, you know, do I have spark? That's yet a second whole circuitry, and we could go through that at another time. And lastly, do I have lights and a charging circuit? Generally speaking, these handlebar switches are really not very good. The plating they use on the contacts varies from lousy to absolute junk. And remember, you're outside in the weather, right? You got rain coming in here, snow, all of that kind of stuff. And those contacts, they oxidize. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Like on this thing, I have a tail light, but the headlights aren't working. You know, why would that be? They should all be from the same circuit, give or take a little bit. So I could do one of two things. It does have high and low for the headlights. So no matter what, the tail light gets power, whether it's on high or low. So I can either kind of fudge things and hook the tail light power to the headlights, then I'm only going to have high or low. So when the tail light's on, the headlights are on. So I could do that, or I can start monkeying with the switch, taking it apart, going through the wires and so forth. I'm I'm not so inclined to do that. Probably what I would do is I'd follow the wires out of the switch, look what kind of connectors are on them, count them, perhaps take a cell phone picture or a video of them, and go look for this switch and hopefully find a replacement for about 10 bucks, 12 bucks, 15 bucks, 20 bucks, whatever, on eBay. That's what I would probably do if I would just assume a bad switch. You start taking this apart, by the way, there's all kinds of slidey connectors that can fall out, and springs, and all kinds of other trouble. So yeah, you could take this apart, and for some of you that are pretty good, you can probably even get it back together again. But taking it apart and improving the situation, you know, maybe, or maybe you're going to make it worse. So anyway, I'm to the point where I can actually put plastic on this thing, put a battery into it, then put plastic onto it, and it'll start. The key switch will, you know, turn it on, let me start it, let me ride it, and do those kind of things. But I'm not going to do that. I want to do another session on doing a pit bike style hack on this thing, and just to show you guys how that could be done. And that gets me the ignition, right? So theoretically, you see how you can hotwire the starter relay, or just jump the starter, bump the starter as I call it, right? So that kind of gives you a starter, now what I'm going to go through is where do you get your spark from if the wiring is all screwed up and I have no spark. Anyway, so I'm going to end this video here, and this is troubleshooting my starter video, and I'm going to do another one on my whole system's hacked. I don't know what to do with it from an ignition point of view, and that'll be another video expected in a day or so. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for dropping by to watch and comment and subscribe. Please remember to keep your feet down, your heads up, and get out and work each and every day. Go out and enjoy each and every day, especially if you enjoy working. Bye now.